This actually happened.
Oh.
I said she's kind, she's self-deprecating, she's loyal, she's funny, and she's godly. And you are.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Laura is originally from Naperville, Illinois. She was raised in a Christian home. She graduated from Westmont College, and she's been here ever since. When Laura speaks today, you'll hear about how she met her husband Peter and how they had their two beautiful twin daughters. Madeline attends Cal, and Sophie attends UCSB, where they both are on water polo scholarships. Laura co-leads a women's Bible study on Monday mornings at Elmo Early School, and she subs in the preschool and the elementary school when they're not traveling to watch their kids play. And Peter is also a teacher at Elmo. I think it's second grade.
Yep,
Is that right?
exactly.
Yeah. She loves her friends and family deeply, but she loves the Lord most of all.
Thank you.
Here she is.
Awesome. Thank you. I can't believe I'm doing this. This is so out of my comfort zone. But you know what? It's a joy to be here to talk to you guys because the Lord has given me a story, and He's been with me through a lot of hard things.
A little bit louder.
Okay, awesome. At first I thought, I'm not qualified to do this, and so I sat down and I prayed about it. And the Lord said, just go and tell your story. Tell them the journey that I put you on. It's not a journey that I ever thought I would have been on. It was hard, but good at the same time. My husband is a total joker, so I knew something was up when he said, oh, honey, let's talk about what you're going to talk about. I found 12 qualities of the perfect Christian mom. Now, I knew this was not going to be good. One of them was, and my daughter was listening. Yep, absolutely. My daughter was listening, and she was laughing her guts out. The first one was, a perfect Christian mom possesses a keen sense of discernment. Guess that doesn't apply to me. And she cultivates a joyful environment. Sophie's now laughing her guts out. And forgives the offense of others willingly. Not me. So guess what? I'm not the perfect Christian mom at all. Sophie, every time after Peter would say one sentence, Sophie would go, are you kidding me? I'm like, thanks, I love my family. Anyway, so my story is about the Lord sustaining me through hard times, through wonderful times. So my story is I grew up in the Midwest, like Cheryl said, in Naperville, Illinois, in a neat Christian family. My dad loved the Lord. Both my parents loved the Lord. My mom had come from a broken family, so she was determined to have our family be cohesive and a loving place. My dad was a wonderful man of God who loved the Lord with all his heart. He was a son of Swedish immigrants who came to Chicago. And my mom is still alive. She lives in Samarkand half the year and Michigan half the year. My dad passed away about 20 years ago from pancreatic cancer. But the one part of his story was that he knew he was dying. He had a couple weeks left to live. And he had his pastor interview him and videotape it about telling his testimony. So at my dad's memorial service, there was my dad giving his testimony so that people that he loved who came to honor him got to hear about Jesus one more time. So I was one of 3 kids, grew up in a neat family. We went to church 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, kind of the old Midwest stuff. And it was awesome. It gave me a great foundation. Came out, went to Westmont College, had another great foundation in my faith. And afterwards, I graduated with an English major, which, what do you do with that? Tell my daughter at Cal, she's also an English major. But I started working in a local business here in town. My dad and mom were like, are you sure? Don't you want to come back to Naperville? I'm like, are you kidding me? No, I'm staying in Santa Barbara. So that's where my story stops for a minute. I'm going to tell you about my husband's story, Peter. So when I was a junior in college, he was 20 years old, trying to figure out his life. He was with friends in Lake Havasu. And it was a hot day. They were goofing around. They were running down an embankment towards the water when there was a ski boat parked right up against the shore. And one of his friends said, hey, Pete, see if you can dive over that ski boat, and I'll dive over on this side and see who gets into the water first. Peter's like, yeah, sure. So they both dive over the ski boat into the water. And Peter's friend dove into water that was a couple feet deep. Peter dove in where it was a couple inches deep. So his skull had a sandbar and it broke his neck. So he's a quadriplegic, which he was so blessed. He thought at first that he had been shot because he couldn't see anything and he couldn't hear anything until he felt a friend's hand on his face, and they flipped him over carefully, brought him up to shore, took him to Lake Havasu Hospital, and they said, "We're pretty sure you broke your neck and you're going to be a quadriplegic." So they flew him to a rehab hospital in the Southern California, and they confirmed, yeah, you broke your neck, so you'll never walk again. Your hands will be impaired. You won't have abdominal muscles. Let's start rehab. So they put a halo in him, screwed it into his skull so he wouldn't move his neck or his head. One of the things he said he remembered the most was he looked around the hospital, and there were two different kinds of people. They were able-bodied, usually 20-year-old men, but they were head traumas, so they wouldn't remember their name from day to day. They wouldn't recognize family. It was truly horrible. And then there were the disabled physically people, but they had their full mind and memory. And he said he decided right then to choose that. That was a blessing. That he wasn't going to walk again, and his hands weren't going to be the same. But he remembered who he was, and he had a full mind to use. That's just Peter. He's amazing. He's totally amazing. That's why I married him, obviously. So he goes through rehab 4 months. His dad was in denial. His dad's like, Dad wouldn't order a wheelchair because he's like, no, my son's going to walk out of here, darn it. And Peter's finally like, I'm not. You have to let me go on with my life as it is. So the Lord was walking with him through that. He said he definitely felt the Lord the whole time with him, getting over the fact that never going to walk again, almost dying in surgery. So 4 months later, he moves back to Santa Barbara with his mom and dad. And back to my story. So I'm working in, actually it turns out it's Peter's mom's business. And I'd heard that the owner had a son in a wheelchair, and I was like, so one day Peter wanted to go check out who the new girl was that was working at the business. That was me. He came wheeling in, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, I didn't see his wheelchair. I just saw Peter. It was the Lord. It was not me at all. I just saw Peter for who he is. And so we got to know each other. I have to say that we knew at the very beginning, both of us knew that was it. We had met the one we wanted to marry. So, and this is something about Peter. He calls his wheelchair his babe magnet. That's my husband, because he's like, come on, ladies. I'm like, really, Peter? Oh my gosh. Anyway, so we eventually got married. He finally asked me to marry him. We got married. I know, I was like, really? For 3 years. That was a long time to wait. So we finally had this big sit-down wedding, 325 people in the Chicago area. But my parents were teetotalers, which means they don't drink alcohol. And so my mom paid the hotel bar to close down so that the Trabucco, these crazy Trabuccos who drink wine, wouldn't get out of hand. They were never out of hand to begin with, but my mom was like, we're not even going there. Later, I just found out recently my mom decided to tell me that they didn't want me to marry Peter. And I'd never known that. I didn't feel that when we got married. I was like, of course, this guy in a wheelchair. So Peter now just recently said, oh my gosh, Laura, your parents let you marry a guy who's in a wheelchair, living with his parents, didn't have a job, and hadn't graduated from college. What were they thinking? I'm like, I don't know, because I thought it was just all perfectly normal. The Lord had a plan. He always does. So he came back here. Peter went to UCSB and graduated. I continued working. Peter was involved in a lawsuit that allowed him to have a portion of money from the place where he dove into shallow water, which they had no signs saying don't dive, which wasn't a good thing. So we could buy a home. We can still stay in Santa Barbara and live here. So the next stage was, oh, wait a minute, we probably want to have kids. Didn't ever think of that when we were 25 and getting married. So we found out that we prayed about it a lot, and we found out there was a doctor that had just moved from Michigan to LA that helped quadriplegics biologically father their own children. So we went and we saw this doctor, and we jumped in with both feet. I would give myself shots in the butt 5 days in a row. Peter would go down and have this procedure that was excruciatingly painful. Then I would get artificially inseminated and wait. And month after month after month, the answer was no, you're not going to get pregnant. And I was like, are you serious? All my friends are getting pregnant and having kids, and here I wait. For 4.5 years, we waited, and we did it over and over and over and over again. And I was like, Lord, what could possibly be your plan for me? I mean, we're spending all this money. Peter has to go through that, and then the answer is always no. His plan was for me to go to something called Bible Study Fellowship while I was waiting. And yes, I grew up in a Christian family, went to Westmont College, but BSF changed my life. It put me on a plane just a little bit closer to the Lord, understanding him, his plan, waiting. Meanwhile, people are giving me books on waiting, which I hated. I was like, really? Another book on waiting that I'm not going to read? I'm like, oh my gosh, it was horrible. But what was the Lord teaching me, of course? To be patient and wait. So 4.5 years go by. Peter and I are like, you know what? I bet the Lord's plan is adoption. That would be awesome. Okay, let's do that. I was having a quiet time, and the Lord said to me, one more time. Do one more cycle. And I was like, really? Just to have it be no again? I went to Peter and I told him, and he was like, let's do it. So we did one more cycle, shots, insemination. I'd taken a pregnancy test. The answer had been no so many times before. I didn't even check the test. I was like, why would I want to get my hopes up again and have the answer be no? So I forgot about it. Peter yelled to me from another room, did you check the test? The timer went off like 10 minutes ago. And I'm like, really? Okay. Well, you know, it was positive. I was like, I'd never seen my husband cry, and he just wept with joy. It was so amazing. So I promptly read all these books about, twins come early and they have low birth weight, and Peter had to take all my pregnancy books away from me because I was like freaking out. I figured out that I needed to eat high levels of protein for better birth weight and having them not come early. So I went completely obsessed and ate super high levels of protein, because if a little was good, a whole bunch was going to be great, right? So finally get to the end, no labor pains. They didn't come early. I was huge. I literally looked like a freak. I was like these skinny little arms and these skinny little legs and this huge body. It was like, I was always afraid of just tipping over because there was so much baby. When I sat down, my stomach went out to my knees. It was so weird. I had to wear 2X and everything because I was just like, one time I was standing out in State Street and a little kid crawled under my dress to see what was underneath my dress because it was so bizarre looking. Whatever. So I get all the way to my due date and I'm like, really? What happened to them coming early? And they didn't. So we scheduled a C-section, and God was good to us. Madeline was born. She weighed 8 pounds, 12 ounces, and Sophie weighed 8 pounds, 6 ounces. So, and we always joke that we brought home toddlers from the hospital because they were like so huge. We're just like, really? Anyway, it was such a joy. What a God thing to give us these gigantic babies. So of course I made it much easier on myself that I decided I wanted to nurse them for at least a year. So, now remember, Peter's disabled. He can't pick up the babies, he can't carry them, he can't change their diapers, but he can encourage me, which is what he did. And so I just strapped on this big old nursing pillow and would get one baby on each side and just do it. I just decided, somebody else must have done this, I can do this, it's not a big deal. So, and God gave me 17 months of getting to nurse them. I was so grateful because I really wanted that to be part of my journey. I wanted to nurse my babies, and he let me do that. So I'm nursing him. I'd get up in the middle of the night. Peter couldn't help me, but I would get on my little pad thing and put both babies on each side. And Peter would just get up, sit up with me, and just encourage me during it. I'd be crying because you know how much it hurts to nurse after a while, after they've been nursing a lot. And he would just say, you know what? I'm praying for you right now, and you can do it. I believe in you. And I just felt like, thank you, Lord. You gave that to me. I really, really, really needed that. I remember one day when I was in Nordstrom, I decided I was going to take the twins out by myself in this giant baby carriage. So I'm getting there, and by now, you know, when you nurse two at the same time, you have to eat all the time. So I was like this, trying to walk through Nordstrom, and I look over, and there's this mom walking towards me with a double baby jogger with twins, and they were 3 years old. And I just made a beeline for her, and I said, tell me it gets easier, please. And I was crying, and she hugged me, and she said, it does. it does get easier, I promise you. And it did. It's awesome. And listening to some of the ladies at our table, you feel like, oh, they're young and you're trying to shape them. Am I doing the right thing? The Lord just gives you the strength. He really does. And I'm a testament to that. The Lord blessed me with, and I'm not a perfect mom, obviously, if Sophie left me out of the room, that you just do what the Lord tells you to do, and he blesses you. And they've come out on the other end, and it's awesome. They're awesome young ladies. So my encouragement to you is if you feel overwhelmed or discouraged, that the Lord was there for me. He gave me everything I needed and more. He just so blessed me. Peter's one rule for the girls was they had to play a sport, and particularly a team sport, because he had been an athlete in a team sport, and he was like, this teaches you it's not all about you. It's about playing with the team, considering other people. So we tried just about, every sport a girl can play. None of them were working. We got to water polo, and it clicked. They both loved it, and they both were fairly good at it. So we got to spend a lot of time. We bought a big old Yukon, piled all the team in, and we got to spend time with their kids, with their friends, with them, just listening. I'm not talking about a helicopter parent. I mean just hanging with your kids and knowing where they're at, and just listening was so important. I was like, really, water polo? I mean, these girls get in the pool and they slug each other. It's like the weirdest sport in the world. I was like, I voted for ballet. And they're like, no, we're not doing ballet, whatever. So God was really, really, really good. Both girls got into good schools because they play this obscure sport. And like Madeline's at Cal Berkeley, Sophie's at UCSB. Madeline's a goalie. She's the starting goalie since her freshman year. And Sophie is a field player. So when Cal plays UCSB, it's not good. Because Sophie knows just where Madeline's blind spots are, and she, boom, just like scores her. And Madeline's like, really, Sophie? You had to score on me in front of everybody. Sophie's like, so it's awesome. And you know what? Just to encourage all of you, they turn out like the Lord wants them to, but these two are 21. They're juniors in college, and they're awesome young ladies. I would just encourage you. It's so cool to be on the other side of it, to be over here and to go, God was with me through that whole thing, and these young ladies are awesome. They love Jesus. It's a cool ride. I mean, it's hard, and we cried a lot. Peter's a great dad of daughters. When the three of us would all be on the same cycle, so to speak, he'd have to break us up, put us all in our own rooms, and just go, ladies, come on, get together here. So I would just encourage you that he's worthy of your trust. He's so worthy of your trust, and I've learned that over my whole life. He has been so good to me, and he's sustained me. He's blessed me. He's awesome, and he's worthy of your trust. I was just randomly looking through the book of Titus yesterday, which is so weird, but I came across this verse. Likewise, teach the older women, that would be me, to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can train the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, and to be kind. And I thought one of the things Peter said he wanted me to emphasize is, young moms, love your husbands too. That's where it all starts, is when your kids see that you love your husband. I don't know. It's been awesome. And Peter and I thought of a couple of different things that helped us as parents. Number one, he loved having them play a sport. I think it shaped them into well-rounded young women. Keep preteens and teens busy. That was a big thing. Peter was determined not to have the teenagers that were hanging out at the mall. And they spent very little time at the mall, believe me. Just keeping them busy. There's a lot of time, if they have a lot of time on their hands. Pray for them and with them. I thought that was really important. I also thought quality and quantity time, both of those. Peter called it dashboard time, that you're just hanging with your kid. You know where they're at. You know what their worries are. You know what their concerns are. I also thought, sit down and really listen to your kid. I can tell when my kid's trying to get my attention because they keep repeating the same thing over and over again. So I put down my phone, I sit down, and I look them straight in the eye. Tell me what's going on. And it works. It's awesome. They get to feel listened to. Don't be afraid to say you're sorry. Oof, that was so hard because I thought, I'm giving up all my power if I say I'm sorry. And that's not true. It's a great example for them to go, sometimes I am totally in the wrong, and I apologize for that. I am sorry. Then I also thought, find moments to say, I believe in you. Just to say, you know what, Madeline and Sophie, God's given you such a talent, such a gift, and I believe you can do this, whatever it is. I believe in you. And just look them right in the eye and say that, and it just, I don't know, it gives them a quiet confidence, I think, just to know that their mom and dad are like, you got it. So the Lord took me in different paths in my life that I never thought I would marry a guy in a wheelchair or go through infertility for so long. But he so sustained me and blessed me that I am just so grateful. And I know that he can and will do the same thing for you guys. So thank you.
Before you leave, does anyone have any questions from the floor before we move on?
Yes.
You mentioned that your kids are just awesome and wonderful, and it's so nice to hear that, like when you say, I come out on the other side, and it's good. But what do you feel you did, or I mean, you said a lot of it was God, but was it that they were involved with their church, or how did you make sure they stayed on the right track? I guess?
Good. They were involved with their church, with their youth group. I would say, it's a good question. I prayed a lot. I tried to listen a lot, and I tried to be patient, like our ladies were talking about, which is so hard. I encouraged them to work hard at everything they did. I didn't like push them into stuff, but that's a good question. I think all those things put together, and I think having a strong dad, Peter, being in the picture and just bringing wisdom to our days that were crazy, or if everybody was fighting, and he just brought a calm to it. I credit him a lot, and I think because of the journey the Lord took him on, it made him who he is. So that's a good question. I know it's so scary. You're just like, are we going to raise these people to be independent adults, or are they just going to be, I don't know, whatever? So kind of scary, but they do. Good question. Oh yes.
Obviously, they spend a lot of time with their water polo friends, and mine's a little one right now, but I'm always thinking about just, when I hearing their conversations and kids that aren't Christian, how did you guys ever have conversations with the girls just about how to, when they hear their friends saying or doing things or
Yes.
encouraging,
Yes, that's a good question.
I don't want them to not be friends with?
Right, exactly. And a lot of them, water polo just so happens to be a really clean sport. There are strict rules. There's not a lot of swearing. There's no partying because you have to get up at 5 in the morning to go to your next game. But we would dialogue with them. So we'd listen to everything, and there'd be a few cuss words in the car because we spent a lot of time in the car. And after everybody was gone, we would sit down and talk and go, that was kind of weird that, none of them go to church. So when we talked about this, it was kind of foreign to them, and so the four of us were on the same page, and tried to stay on that same page even though we were in the midst of a lot of non-believers. So that's a really good question. I think just keeping a dialogue going with them, and then being at church with them and praying with them, just gave them the balance of, okay, this is the world, this is where we are. That was a good question. Water polo is a great sport, by the way. Yes?
When it conflicted, because I know water polo is, time consuming. When it conflicted, did you sway, or did you let the girls sway on, do they do youth group or church, or do they do water polo, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say do church, do a balance. We almost always did water polo. It's super competitive, and they were super competitive, and the high school games are not on the weekends, so that was a good thing. But every once in a while there was a tournament. That's a really good question. A pastor a couple years ago said, really, you can't choose church over your sport? And that's always stayed with me because, we just always went to church. You didn't skip, for heaven's sakes. So yeah, we did have to choose water polo every once in a while. But we would talk to them about it and say, we hate having you skip, but this is our commitment to the team, especially when Madeline was the goalie and there weren't any other goalies. We're like, I guess we got to go. So it's a good question. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to know, how did you survive those early years with twins? And I think about, having a husband who could maybe come home at the end of the day and help. You said he was an encourager, but how did you physically do everything?
Yeah.
Like cooking and
It's a good question. It's a good question. No, I would put, seriously, and I don't know how I did it except the Lord, because I'm not this big, brawny woman who can do it all. I would put one in a front pack and one on my hip a lot of times, just because to keep him with me. Peter made it easy. He was the one who just made it like, you know what, honey, I know I can't change the diaper. I'm going to talk you through it, and it's going to be okay, and the Lord, that's the short answer, is the Lord gave me the strength. Because I literally at times would just sit and cry and go, can't do it, can't do it. But then they're both crying, and you're like, well, I have to. So, I don't know. It was very hard. I had to eat a lot just to keep my stamina up and pray a lot. So, that's a good question. Okay. Thank you, ladies.
I also need to add, Peter is a great, wonderful, loving man, and a knockout. Just in case you did not know. Little sidebar.
No wonder you didn't notice the wheelchair.
I know. It's true, I know. And he's like, yeah, come on, ladies. I don't say that. He has a very good self-esteem, we'll say. Anyway, whatever. I know. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Thank you.